while Felipe is just doing the jiggery pokery with the technology, I'll sort of introduce myself. So my name is Polly Gibb, and I have been in, well, I run Wire for an organisation called Wire, which is Women in Rural Enterprise. We're called Women in Rural Enterprise. And we've been going about, getting on for 20 years, not quite 20 years now. And our purpose is to support, I just go on to the presentation, Felipe, don't focus on my face for any longer than is absolutely necessary. Our purpose is to support female-led rural businesses. We've done that in all sorts of ways over the years, training courses, outreach programs, all over the UK, predominantly in England, but also in Wales and to some extent in Scotland. And we've worked with thousands of businesses over this number of years, and we've helped them, some of them start. We've stood alongside them while they try and survive, and we've been with them while they're growing. Some of them are growing. Just a sort of note, there are lots and lots of photographs in my presentation, as there were in Julia's presentation, and in the same way, all of the photographs of the women are people who've been involved with Wire, members of Wire, or have been come to a conference or participated in some way. There is actually, looking at Julia's photographs, it absolutely echoed something that she mentioned about when she was leading the Wire sort of chapter in Northumberland. And Wire has never particularly worked with very marginalised or very excluded women. And that's probably a weakness in our work, but that's not really something we ever set out to do. And when you're not really focused on working very excluded women, this is why they become excluded. They end up not being involved. And I think there is a difference in the photographs. The sorts of women you'll see in our photographs, they just look a little bit different from many of the women that Julia is working with. And I think we really need to take note of that and just think, if you want to include people, you need to really work at it and include them. It doesn't happen passively. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. So the next slide is quite similar, but you'll notice the little Harper Adams University logo in the bottom, and I need to say that Wire is based at Harper Adams University. And this is where Wire came from. So it'd be interesting for you academics amongst us, that Wire came out of a piece of research, of academic research, which was looking at farm diversifications, and it found that the overwhelming proportion of farm diversifications, it was actually 96%, were set up and driven forward by women. It wasn't the male farmer who was seeking to diversify the farm, it was usually the woman on the farm. And there are lots of good reasons for that, and it goes back into history, it was ever so. But when this was discovered with this academic research, it seemed to be quite a surprise to a lot of the policymakers. And when the same researcher, Dr. Izzy Warren-Smith, talked to these women who were setting up these businesses on farms, she found that they were excluded from all the farm business support that was going out to the farms. So that there was a lot of money, government money at that time, going to help farm diversification, because it was a very difficult time at that. It was during foot and mouth. There was British farmers were really struggling, so there was a lot of help going out to them, but it was completely missing the woman on the farm. It was the male business advisor would talk to the male farmer, and the woman who was actually running the business would be making them a cup of tea and thinking, you should be talking to me, mate, because I'm the one that's running the business. So anyway, we called a conference. Nearly 500 women came from across the UK, and Wire was, and that's where Wire came from. And we realised we needed to do something about this. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide now. Thank you. So, and just click through them. So what are Wire's sort of key principles and beliefs? So we believe, why I believe that rural women, we're a part of the solution to rural economies. We're part of the solution, their potential to contribute to rural economies and drive the renewal of those economies. So it very much wasn't coming from the point of, and I think Julia spoke to this again, there's so much synergy between all of these presentations. This thing about trying not to occupy that space of the sort of the poor me, the women as victims, but sometimes you have to do that in order to get the funding to do something. But we're very much of the view that we need to present women as part of the solution. Okay, and click again. And for those women who are part of the solution, self-employment can be a solution for those rural women who are wishing to enter the labour market. Now, this is where we get into the realms of isolation and transport. I think the big overlap with transport. And I think Biljana mentioned women who are wanting to enter the labour market, if there isn't a bus and they haven't got a car and they're a long way from the local town, there isn't an opportunity for them to get what would need to probably be a part-time job, travel in, do the job, get back again. There's just not the time. So self-employment might be the solution for them. And we also have an absolute belief that women are innovators. So we click again, Felipe. They're innovators, leaders, and able to and wanting to facilitate change and aspire to positive impact. So we look at the women that we work with as kind of animateurs, agents of change. And I think that's another really positive way of looking at this, that we're all working and seeking to work with rural women, and we should look at ourselves and look at the women that we're working, potentially agents of change and leaders in their community. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, which is a beautiful picture of a farm in Lancashire, and this is the farm where one of our very original members lived. It's a dairy farm, and it was a dairy farm that was struggling financially, as a lot of dairy farms have done over the years. So she. Somebody, I think it was Hannah, mentioned women often are asked to sort of do the administration and run the books on the farms, and very often the woman will realise the farm's about to go down the drain, so she realised something needed to be done. So her motivation in setting up the business. And it goes back to the last slide. It's not really, oh, I've got this great idea, I want to set up a business, I want to be an entrepreneur. It usually, the women, a lot of the women that we work with, the motivation comes from an absolute need to bring some more money into the family and support the farm financially, or for non-farm based women, support for the family unit financially. But this rural remoteness precluding them actually going to get a job. They probably would rather get a job. So we sort of think of them very often as quite reluctant entrepreneurs, and kind of almost pushed into having to set up their own business. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, it's the same picture of the same farm, and I'd like you to just think about what you think. What you think the challenges are setting up the farm. Sorry, my battery's suddenly gone low, so I'm just, as Julia did, I'm just going to plug it in. So for a woman setting up a business on that farm, what would be the barriers and the challenges that she would face?
You want to just write it down?
So if we.
If people want to have the chat, I can write it down on the presentation.
Yeah, if people want to sort of, I think given the time, given the time pressure and perhaps the sort of difficulties of doing joint working, if people sort of think to themselves what they think the challenges might be. If we were in a room together, we'd discuss it, wouldn't we? But so if you click through them, Felipe, so we sort of group them. into three kind of sections, really. The technical skills, such as skills, finance, access to market. So sort of these women are often reluctant entrepreneurs. Very often they don't have high levels of education, and they haven't been sort of business leaders in the past. So the skills and the access to finance, access to their marketplace, those kind of technicalities. And then we find very, what I would say is the strongest barriers, the cultural and the soft barriers. So I call it the sort of invisible strings that hold women back. And this is this thing about having grown up and living in what is a sexist landscape and a sexist culture. Very much, particularly on farms, very much focused around the male farmer and the importance of the farm and the importance of his work, as opposed to the importance of the work of the contributions of the women. So these invisible strings are the strongest challenges. They are the things that hold people back, and in some ways they're the hardest thing to overcome. And then very clearly the physical isolation, just the physical isolation, being isolated from your market, being isolated from your suppliers, being isolated particularly from other women and other businesses, which is needing to be overcome. Okay, so just before we go on to the next slide, I just want you to think about that photograph, and I'm going to challenge you to think about what business this lady came up with. So what business? So write down 2 ideas for something that this lady came up with to save her farm, basically, from going bankrupt. And we'll come back to that in a minute later on in the presentation. Okay, so what has Wire done to overcome these challenges and support these businesses? And we'll go on to the next slide now, thank you. Well, I've said we've done all sorts of things, but the thing that I feel is the most powerful thing that we've done, the most sustainable thing, and the thing that has the kind of one remaining thing that we do, is that we set up networks. When we asked our members and the women that we were working with, what is the most important thing for them, it was to meet other women, other business women, and get that peer support, that combined energy, sort of cultural help and courage to overcome those invisible strings that were holding them back. And we couldn't afford to employ somebody all over, somebody local all over Britain. So we've come up with a model of volunteer-led networks. So all over, predominantly England, but also Wales and a couple in Scotland, we've got some volunteer-led local networks. So this is where a woman will sort of step forward and say, yes, I'm going to set up a network. They run a monthly meeting. They might have a speaker in, and they have time and sorts of structures to talk with each other and do that, all sort of mutual support. So if we go onto onto the next slide, the next couple of slides are photographs of our networks. Now, the wonderful thing about these networks is that if you get somebody local to set something up for the women around her, they will set up something that is appropriate to their own personality and appropriate to the women who are part of their group. So our networks are many and varied. Now, this is a photograph of the Lichfield network, and Lichfield is an area. It's sort of on the edge of the West Midlands. It's not remote. It's quite near some big urban centres, and you'll see that they look really quite business-like. So this is a networking group. This is one of their monthly meetings. They dress up smart, they get together, they have presentations, and it all looks quite sort of business-like. If we go on to our next slide, this is the Pembrokeshire network. Okay, and this is one of their team building activities. Once a year, they'd all go out and have a bit of fun in the sea. And one of the women ran a co-steering business, and they went co-steering with her business. So the Pembrokeshire Wire was very, very different in size and nature from the Lichfield Wire. And if we go on to the next slide, and here we've got the Carmarthenshire Wire. Okay, so they're meeting in the gallery, which belongs to one of the women. They've got bottles of beer and wine and chocolate, you know, and they're sitting around and they're having a discussion about a business problem or about a challenge, something that they're facing, and they're all sharing their knowledge and supporting each other to enable, you know, whoever's got the problem or whatever to go forwards. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So that's, yeah, and that's the, we work a lot nowadays with social media, increasingly with social media, just to keep things going. Okay, so let's go back to Valley View Farm. Sorry, not go back, go forward, but you'll see we're going back to Valley View Farm. So, have you got any ideas of what this lady came up with to run from her farm? We can perhaps have a few ideas from people now. You can type them in, or perhaps on the comments. And Felipe, if you could read them out.
Okay, I'm getting the chat open here. If everyone could put in the chat, I can write down here. Okay, so we have bed and breakfast. B&B, occasional visits, making cheese.
Okay. Okay, so lots of really good ideas. Lots of really good ideas based on where she is, locational. And actually, we've got members on dairy farms who do all of those things. So those are all legitimate ideas. If we go on to the next slide. Okay, so she did indeed set up a B&B. So that's one of the first things a lot of farm-based women do, and a lot of farms, they have a bed and breakfast or farm cottages, and have done for a long time, and that supplements the family income. Okay, for Sally and their farm, that wasn't enough. It wasn't bringing in enough money. Okay, so the second business she set up, and you've had little tantalising little glimpse of this, you'll never have guessed this, she set up, and go on to the next slide, she set up an online big bra company. Okay, she called it amplebosom.com. Now this was the days before the internet, so this was she had a sort of catalogue, and she would it was mail order, she would send them out, and this was from her own experience, the difficulty of finding really nice bras for ample bosoms, and it was an absolute success. And this just illustrates really how incredibly creative and innovative our members are, and women can be, and how driven they are by the need to bring in money to their families. Okay, she needed another idea, so she came up with another idea. So and now I'm going to show you a few slides about how this thing works, this combination of training, networking, and walking alongside this longitudinal relationship we have with our members. So if you go on to the next slide. So Sally Robinson was one of our first members. She did a business course with us, and she set up her business. And then her business was really successful. So there she is in her warehouse on her farm. The last time, you know, I talked to her, she was employing 20 people. Now these were mainly part-time jobs, fantastically valuable jobs in the rural areas, because these are the part-time jobs in the rural area that women need. She exported around the world, and her prime concern, her objective, she supported the farm viability. So if we go on to the next line, and here's Sally Robinson speaking at one of our conferences. So it's this giving back, this network thing that she had learned a lot. She had learned from her experience. She'd been successful, and she really wanted to come and help other people. It's not closing the trapdoor once you're through. It's absolutely hauling a few other women through with you. So here she is, talking at one of our conferences. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. So another example is foot trails. So one of these women in this photograph was at one of our conferences, and just have a little think to yourself, which of these women was the one who, from that room, stepping out of that room, made a great leap forward in her business. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. Now, the lady sitting in the classroom with the big jangly necklace went into it. This lady was talking at our conference, and she is, if you just click through, Felipe, she was, at that time, she was a secret millionaire. It was a thingy my bobby on the television called Secret Millionaire. Anyway, this lady was a very successful, established businesswoman, and she came and spoke at our conference. And what Julie from Foot Trails did was, everybody else sits in the conference thinking, oh gosh, that's really interesting. Thank you, Kavita Oberoi. You've told us some really interesting things. One person went and hijacked her after her speech and said, could you be my mentor? I want to take my business forward and grow my business. Can you be my mentor? So Kavita became her mentor, and she grew her business, I don't know, tenfold over the next couple of years. Okay, go on to the next slide. And here is another of our members, Emma Heathcote James. This is in the first year of operation. She had a handmade soap company. And this is Emma exhibiting at an agricultural show, because we used to take women and their businesses to agricultural shows, and they would practice marketing and sales techniques and things like that. And so Emma also was one of these people who, if there's an opportunity in the room, she will grab hold of it. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. Emma came to one of our conferences where we had a Tesco's buyer giving a presentation, and this we had quite a mixed response to this Tesco's buyer, because a lot of the women in the room said we should be talking to Tesco's, you know, big supermarkets are evil and things like this. But, you know, it's for different people to take what they want to from that presentation. And some women, it reinforced their belief they didn't want to deal with Tesco's. Emma thought, I want to grow my business. So she went and grabbed hold of the woman after her presentation. And she said, I want to supply Tesco's. Can we meet up and you know, will you work with me? And within a year, she was supplying Tesco's. And now if you go to Sainsbury's, Tesco's, there's about 4 different supermarkets she supplies now. And because that was her aspiration for her business, she wanted to grow it and be a bigger business. She's never going to be a massive business. And she makes organic handmade soap. That's what she does. And you would never think that she would be able to get organic handmade soap that's made in Gloucestershire in a little village into supermarkets across the country. So if we go on to the next slide. Okay, so what I've tried to illustrate a little bit is the wire model. Okay, if you just click through. So I think there's 3 points on this one. So the wire model is it's the network, which is the infrastructure which aids business survival, innovation and growth. So a lot of business support initiatives, it's about a physical infrastructure. You know, they want to build incubator units and give out equipment and fund physical you know, infrastructure and have business advisors going out and things like that. Well, we say that it's the network, it's that social capital within the network, which is actually the infrastructure, the valuable bit. Okay, and go on to the next one. That's important because it's the building of the peer support and building up the social capital, and then working from that and allowing the women to access that great body of experience, knowledge and courage, which is going to be so important for them moving forward with their businesses. Okay, and the next one. So we're local but not parochial. So we've got all these little groups, some of which are really tiny. There will just be 5 women group meeting, and some are quite big. There are 30 or 40 members. We've got these all over the country, in some quite remote places. And so we're local, but we're not parochial because they are all part of this wider national network. And, you know, I'll be talking to government, I'll be learning about different things going on. And there's a real feeding, you know, backwards and forwards interaction of information going these both ways. Okay. Okay, and click the last two, Felipe. And so we can link into training where they don't just sort of sit there and fester. We sort of link them into training, specific business expertise and research and development. And the really important thing, and it goes back to the work I think that Julia's doing, but I think that threads through all of this, anybody who's wanting to work with women in my experience is women in rural areas, I would think it's probably the same with any group of women. It's the relationship, the ongoing longitudinal relationship throughout the business journey. So you need to look at the whole life, not just the specific problem they might have come to you with, such as transport. You look at the whole life and you try and create a longitudinal journey with them so that you have an ongoing relationship as that story, as they travel through that journey, you're standing alongside them. And then I think the last slide, and the key things that Wire does, we do very little actually nowadays. We coordinate the network to keep that going, and we act as a catalyst, to bring people together. And we sort of, I feel that we act as a catalyst. Sometimes people need a little bit of a nudge or a little bit of a framework in order to do that stepping forward and being the change maker in their own communities. So that's it. I think there's a last slide just with a few more photographs of chickens and sheep and things. And that's my presentation, so I'm really happy to take questions. So it's not specifically about transport, but it's about quite a successful initiative that's lasted through time, that's worked with rural women.